I'm Jason Grumet. I am the founder and president of the Bipartisan Policy Center, and on behalf of our leadership, former Senate Majority Leaders Howard Baker, Bob Dole, Tom Daschle, and Senator George Mitchell, we are proud and pleased to see you today. Today we are releasing, as you know, our National Transportation Policy Project, which really exemplifies the touchstones of what we aspire to at the BPC. That is to bring together a broad-based group of people who have both a depth of involvement in a subject matter, but also a depth of engagement in the public policy and political debate, and seek to, through some always constructive and occasionally heated principled compromise, develop ideals that are both aspirational and at the same time pragmatic. We believe that the report that you are going to hear about today does just that. It charts a long-term vision for transportation policy while making what we hope are specific and actionable recommendations that Congress will take into account as it thinks about our nation's surface transportation. In addition to being smart, we actually also try to be relevant, and we have a very aggressive advocacy effort which has already begun. But one of the things that differentiates the Bipartisan Policy Center is that for many organizations, days like today are the conclusions of projects. And for us, we see ourselves as very much at the midway point. The purpose of this exercise was to bring together a group that could form an active coalition for change, that could bring a diversity of voices with clear substance, with sharpened pencils, with math shown to the Congress, to the administration, to advocate for a new vision for transportation policy. And this is essentially the kickoff of that second phase. I would like to thank the generous support from the William Flora Hewlett Foundation, the Rockefeller and Surdna Foundations for bringing us together. And now it is my privilege to introduce our project director, Emil Frankel, a known quantity, the center of our hub of our conspiracy. Emil was the former commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Transportation. He was the assistant secretary for policy at DOT, and he has been the inspiration that has brought us together. And I'd like you to join me in welcoming Emil.
Thank you. Welcome. My role is very simple at this point. First of all, to thank and introduce the wonderful and extraordinary co-chairs of this project who have provided such leadership to it. And you'll note that they represent what the Bipartisan Policy Center is all about. Bipartisanship, not only in the fact that they're two Republicans, two Democrats, but their spirit and the kind of leadership that they gave at each level of government in which they've served, and they represent leadership at the local, state, and federal levels. I'd first of all like to acknowledge and welcome former Virginia Governor and now United States Senator from Virginia, Mark Warner, who will be introduced by Senator Gorton. First of all, our chairs, and they'll speak briefly to the press. The way we're going to organize this is brief remarks by our co-chairs, and then remarks by Senator Warner, and then we'll open it up for questions from the press, and at around 10 o'clock we'll break that and shift to the other part of the room for the panel discussion, another part of our meeting. First of all, I also want to mention that one of our co-chairs, former Mayor of Detroit, Dennis Archer, is on the way. He landed this morning. We're told he did dodge thunderstorms and had landed, and is on his way here. All he has to do now is fight Washington traffic. Our co-chairs, in addition to Mayor Archer, former United States Congressman from New York, Sherry Boehlert, long service in the House of Representatives, before that a county executive, and before that a staff assistant in Washington, so he has been in and around transportation issues as a leader for a very long time. Former United States Congressman Martin Sabo of Minnesota, represented Minneapolis for many years, and as you all know, was a leader in the budget and appropriations process in a range of issues, and he served for many years as Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives. And former United States Senator Slate Gorton of the state of Washington, also with service at the state level before as a legislator and as an attorney general, and then very, very distinguished service for a long time in the United States Senate. So with that, Congressman Boehlert.
When I first came to Capitol Hill 45 years ago, as a starry-eyed staffer, I used to sit in the gallery every time a transportation bill came to the floor. And in those days, it was everyone scrambling to see who could get what for what project back home, and there was a conscious effort to pave America from coast to coast. It hasn't changed all that much over the years, although it has improved. Phrases or words like intermodality are now part of our everyday vocabulary, but there's no question about it. Our current transportation system is strained to capacity and growing increasingly congested. The infrastructure is aging and declining. There is little accountability for performance and no recognition of the important link between transportation investments, energy security, and climate change. The Transportation Policy Project was launched to bring new ideas and a bipartisan approach to transportation policy. Our focus has been on developing a comprehensive reform proposal that is both bold yet practical. We have had some disagreements, as you might suspect, when you gather an assembly like ours, but every member stands behind this set of recommendations taken as a whole. This group of individuals has a broad diversity of political views and professional experiences. It includes transportation experts and leaders, as well as users of the system whose voices have not typically been heard in policy debates. Our proposal provides a compelling framework for the upcoming authorization bill and beyond, and we are on the eve of seeing that bill introduced. It's taken us nearly a half-century to lose our purpose in transportation policy, and we won't get it back all at once. But the approach we outline puts us on a new path with many ideas that can be implemented immediately. The program has been too focused on revenue sharing and process rather than on results. Fundamental reform is needed, and that is what we propose. One good example is energy and the environment, an area in which I've been particularly involved during my congressional career. Many people are surprised to learn that energy and climate change concerns are virtually ignored when making transportation investments. Our report calls for further integrating energy and environmental concerns into transportation policy and funding decisions in order to ensure a sustainable and secure future. Thank you.
Over the years, observing both state and federal government, it's been my observation that most good decisions are made when we do some good planning in advance. And one of the strong recommendations of this report is that we significantly improve the planning process for both state and local government and the federal government. We don't suggest exactly how it's done, but it should be part of how we evaluate the jobs that state and local governments are doing. At the federal level, we need to significantly increase our capacity to gather good data about what's going on. We think doing planning right means that we can make better investments to begin with, and that they'll more adequately serve our goals. Our commission comes after some other commissions that dealt with financing. So we don't deal to the same degree with financing as some of the other commissions, but we had some suggestions. One is that clearly our current system needs more revenue, and clearly in the long term that's not all going to come from the fuel tax. We also think that it's a mistake to fund the program from general revenue. We should find user fees that pay for our program. This could be done in a variety of ways. Clearly, and hopefully something that happens this year is we start putting in place the process for doing a VMT in the future. We also suggest that if there is a carbon program, whether it's whatever its form, some of that revenue should go for transportation. Because clearly a significant part of the problem that we have with our energy and environment is generated in the transportation sector. And any solution should, any revenue should help solve that problem. And again, as Sherry mentioned, the way we raise our revenues should help us deal with the goals we have, like dealing with the energy environment. The fees we have should help us solve that problem, but rather than be sort of separate and removed from that problem. It should also help us to deal with the problem of congestion. And it should be something that gives a user some evidence what the true cost of transportation is. So it's been an honor to serve on this commission, lots of good recommendations, and we hope they're considered by the Congress.
Let me just say at the outset what a privilege it has been for me to serve with such distinguished co-chairs. And Senator, thank you very much for your resignation that allowed me to take your place. I appreciate that very much. We have a fabulous staff that we worked with, and the members of the policy project were just outstanding with their contributions. The transportation policy structure we proposed is designed to achieve national goals by aligning funding structures to reward good performance. One area of emphasis is on metropolitan areas, the economic backbone of our nation. Current transportation policy is born out in the interstate era, when what was needed then was a great new connecting network. Our new vision, however, recognizes that today most Americans live in metropolitan areas, and that the metropolitan areas are, in fact, the engines of our nation's economy. Current policy is prescriptive, dictating how and for what urban areas must spend federal funding. What we call for is a bottom-up approach with maximum flexibility for cities and states to invest however they want, so long as it achieves national goals. Funding recipients will be judged on whether they achieve national goals, not on how they achieve them. Freight transportation is of tremendous economic importance. Despite this obvious fact, it might be surprising to hear that we currently have no specific freight transportation policy or vision. Our new vision also recognizes the importance of freight to the modern era. We call for broad eligibility for freight investment and a multi-state collaboration that will help reduce congestion while meeting energy, environmental, and safety goals. This approach that we are suggesting calls for accountability. We believe if Congress would give this great consideration and after debate consider adopting it, it would move America front and center to continue with the leadership that we deserve.
U.S. transportation policy needs to be more performance-driven, more directly linked to a set of clearly articulated goals, and more accountable for results. That is not the case today. In fact, today there's not even a requirement for an elementary cost-benefit analysis of transportation projects. We call for making the best investments, regardless of whether they're in roads, transit, rail, or any other mode. We propose a set of performance measures that comprise a fair evaluation of the benefits of any given investment. Given today's economic recession, this performance-based strategy we call for is more important than ever in ensuring that money for transportation is spent wisely and effectively. But under any circumstances, citizens want and deserve results, particularly economic benefits from our transportation investments. Transportation policy today encompasses 108 separate programs. We propose to reduce that number to 6 in order to provide a clearer and more focused federal role in transportation. Implementing a performance-driven approach and introducing accountability will challenge entrenched interest and require government institutions at all levels to change long-standing practices and ways of doing business. But with a funding crisis for transportation and the nation, it is important to do so if we are to move forward with a positive and effective transportation policy. And now, one vagrant thought. Probably it's better to be lucky than good. And this project has been lucky as well as good. One of my original co-chairmen of this effort was Mark Warner. And I can assure you, though I just met him when we began this process, he was an extremely hands-on co-chairman of this effort. And much of what you see here today is a result of his guidance and counsel. In fact, he was so interested, he stuck with it well after he became a candidate for the United States Senate and only left when he had to spend 100% of his time on that. We were lucky in getting Dennis Archer, the former mayor of Detroit, as his replacement, and Mayor Archer has contributed significantly to what we've done. But now we have a United States Senator as well. And his commitment to this process is illustrated by the fact that 2 of his committees are banking and commerce, each of which will play a significant role in this reauthorization bill. So with the great hope that we not only have a terrific report, but an inside lobbyist, I give you Senator Mark Warner.
Well, thank you, Slade. That was about as smooth a lobbying effort as I've ever heard. Let me thank you, Slade, and Martin and Sherry for co-chairing. And Mr. Mayor Dennis, it's great to see you. This is exciting to be here for this unveiling of this project. I see a lot of the participants on the team who candidly lent us the expertise as we started to develop this effort. Let me make a couple of comments. One, to Emil and to Jason and to everybody part of the bipartisan team, let me tell you, congratulations for getting this type of group together. For those of you who don't know me, I was just a recently elected senator, and during my whole job application process, I always campaigned on the basis that I wanted to be if I got hired, I wanted to be a bipartisan radical centrist. And then I got hired, and then I came into this institution, and I'm finding that's a little bit easier to say than to do. And you know, one of the challenges I think we find at this moment in time is how we can make these kind of bipartisan efforts actually translate into policy implementation. It is, if there was ever a time when we need to check our Democratic and Republican hats at the door and kind of put on our American hats first and foremost when we enter into the Senate or into the House, it is now. I tell you, I spend about half my time just kibitzing on the Republican side as I do on the Democratic side. It sometimes gets raised eyebrows from some of my colleagues, but it's the only way we're going to find the kind of consensus, and Lord knows around transportation, these issues shouldn't break down on partisan barriers. Now, I also have to say, Senator, that I have learned a little bit more as someone who was a governor for a long time and used to complain about why we didn't seem to have any national transportation policy. I understand a lot better now. You mentioned the fact that I'm on 2 out of the 3 big committees, but it is a little remarkable that in the 21st century, we still take transportation policy, at least on the Senate side, and divvy it up: highways at EPW, rail and commerce, transit and banking, and the notion that somehow with these kind of jurisdictional divides, we're going to come out with a aligned national transportation policy makes that hurdle even greater to overcome. I would also put in place one other kind of education that I've already received in these first 6 months. And I know we've got press here, and this is, keep the names out to protect the innocent. But first couple of weeks into the new job, we had this little bill called the Stimulus Up. I was part of the bipartisan group in the Senate that was trying to see if we can get some kind of compromise together, and we were behind closed doors trying to negotiate what the bill would look like. And a number of my colleagues were saying, we need more infrastructure, we need more infrastructure funding. And I was quickly pointing out that one of the items they had just decided to almost zero out was the multimodal funding. And I think there was a lack of understanding that multimodal was actually infrastructure funding, and that maybe this kind of education process that we need to think outside of our silos in terms of road, rail, transit, was something that we still got a long way to go at the federal level to make that case. But I very much commend this project, and I think we will have, hopefully, not just a willing partner in me and a number of other colleagues, but I've already had the opportunity to have a number of conversations with Secretary LaHood. And I have mentioned this project a couple of times to him, and I think Secretary LaHood, and I know we've got Karen Ray and others here from the administration, understand that we need to get out of the silo approach to transportation funding, that we have to think in a broader way. We've clearly got the issues that have already been mentioned around funding, but as important as funding is, if we don't set the base of how we're going to fund and what are going to be our metrics, then we're never going to get there. Again, one quick story from my governorship. I recall when I inherited our Department of Transportation, we had a not only underfunded Department of Transportation, but we had a Department of Transportation that was only getting about 20% of our projects on time and 50% of our project on budget. And so trying to make the case to the people of Virginia that we needed additional funding was made extra difficult. For those of you who've lived in the area, perhaps recall back in 2002, I tried to make that case unsuccessfully in a local referendum, but part of the challenge as well was to bring greater level of accountability. So we completely revamped our Department of Transportation. We put in a whole series of new metrics. We put in place a real-time active, what we call dashboard, so that Virginians could gauge the project of any transportation project. And by bringing metrics in, and we improved our department's performance to north of 80%. And now I believe we're actually up close to 90%, both in terms of on time and on budget. That was our watchword. I think at the same time, we've got to bring that kind of accountability, not just in terms of on time and on budget, in terms of federal projects, but what are our overarching goals? And that's what this policy group, that's what this commission has put together. Historically, as we all know, for the last 50 plus years, most of our transportation projects, I think as Sherry indicated when he first came, was based upon who could get how much in terms of how much asphalt we could lay down. And most of our projects were top-down driven as we needed to build out a national interstate infrastructure. Well, now, and what is, I think, so exciting about the results of this commission is to take a fresh look that says, recognizing, as Dennis said, that more and more of our people live in metropolitan areas, that we've got to actually allow those states and metropolitan areas to build a bottoms-up approach where we measure the results, not simply the amount of asphalt we lay down or the number of vehicle miles traveled. I remember one of our first conversations when the commission was put together, the notion that we needed to think about transportation more broadly and really think about moving not only people, but moving goods, moving information. And we had a number of spirited conversations that said, as we look at transportation policy, it really needs to include energy use. It needs to include environmental concerns. It needs to include safety. It needs to include things like moving information. We had a number of conversations about should broadband capabilities in terms of laying down fiber optic be part of this new transportation thinking. And so I want to commend the Commission's efforts. I do think they will give us those of us now on the policy side, a framework on how we should look at not only the highway bill, but I believe all of our transportation policy. I think, as Emil and Jason knows, over my first 6 months, whenever I get the chance, I put a plug in for the effort. It's this kind of bipartisan and I think very future-oriented approach to transportation funding and approach to transportation structure that the Congress desperately needs. Slade, if you can also help me figure out how we can actually move past some of these jurisdictional boundaries on the Senate side, I'd love that advice as well. So I do look forward to being kind of the inside man, advocate for trying to advance the work of this commission. It was a real pleasure, Jason and Emil, for me to have a chance to work with all of you, and both from a bipartisan standpoint, from a future-oriented standpoint, and from a recognition that the old ways just aren't going to work in the 21st century. I commend the work of the Commission and look forward to actually moving this work from a document into federal policy. Thank you very much.